Hey everybody, it's day 5 of NaNoWriMo, and so this week I'm planning my new project. So that's kind of what I'm planning to do all week. I imagine it's going to take me all week. I guess along with that, I'd like to keep writing my other drafts. I don't know how well it's going to go because outlining kind of takes me a while just to think through the character arcs and the projects, but since I did get some requests last time to talk about basically my process, my 4-act planning process, along with my scene cards, all that kind of stuff, so I figured I would do that while I'm planning my story. And today I just want to talk about the 4-act part of it, along with some of the plot embryo or story circle, which Emily Bourne did a fantastic series on. She went in depth into each of the stages, so I will link her series of videos down below. And also Rachel Stephen, who really started talking about the plot embryo. I didn't understand it really when she was talking about it. Emily's videos really helped me realize that I do kind of use this story circle when I'm planning. I just kind of do it my own way. And then Marissa Mohi also did a video about outlining, and she mostly focused on the plot embryo as well. And finally, 3rd time's the charm is when I actually realized what I do specifically to change the story circle to match like my 4-act structure in my head, which it follows most beat sheets. I will say it's a little bit different, but the general story structure is the same if you know story structure. And maybe it's just me thinking about it differently, just having a different perspective for what works for me. And that's all it is just me using different terminology, just saying it differently. I don't know. But I'm gonna try to explain to you guys how I do the 4-act structure and kind of do like my character plot embryo, story circle. And that's probably gonna take me a little bit to explain, but I'll do that. And then in my next video, I will give you guys examples of my current project while I'm outlining it. I think that'll be fun. Okay, so I'll turn you guys around so you can see what I'm doing. I'm gonna try to draw it out for you guys. Let's see how well this goes. Woo! Hello everybody. Okay, so the story circle has 8 stages, and they're pretty much comparable to many beat sheets. If you wanted to compare it to the hero's journey, it's basically the same. Like, it's the same steps in the same order of events. That's why it doesn't really matter like what kind of plot device you want to use to help you plan your story. The hero's journey, a tragic journey, plot embryo, it doesn't really matter. Like, it really comes down to the story structure. And as long as you understand story structure, plotting or planning the story becomes easier. The story circle, plot embryo can be used for your characters, like to develop your character arcs and the plot simultaneously. And I really love that. I'll try to show you guys how I basically go about doing it. I'll start off with red. Okay, so I'm gonna try to draw the basic 3-act structure I think that most people use. Let's just say it basically looks like this, where you have Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. Now, I like to think of it as a 4-act structure. So all I do is basically split it up here so that I know it's not exactly even on this diagram, but it's 4 quarters instead of this having this big middle act that can kind of get muddled. Each of these sections is kind of about the same length, so they end up being even throughout the book. So this ends up being Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4, and that's how I think of it. Now, you can call this Act 2 Part 1, Act 2 Part 2, Act 2 Part A, Act 2 Part B, like you can call it whatever you want, but because I just generally think of it as 4 acts, it's just easier for me to say 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just know that these 2 parts in the middle are all about the rising action, basically. Okay, so I guess what I would say is that generally speaking, no matter what plot device you're using, what beat sheet you're using. The hero's journey, the tragic journey is a little bit different, but the hero's journey, everything is kind of the same throughout these acts, these quarters, the thirds, however you want to separate it. It all basically boils down to the same thing, is that Act 1 is the setup, right? You are being set up for everything to come. You get introduced to the characters and you learn, I guess, what people would call the inciting incident, the thing that sparks the characters into the plot. And then this quarter section right here is usually a turning point that goes from Act 1 to Act 2. I just call everything turning points. I don't know why, that's just how I work. So we have this turning point, and then we have Act 2, which is pretty much all about rising action. This is all rising action and more rising action. That's like, we're gonna go up, and then in this act, we're gonna go up higher. Like, we're gonna raise the stakes more. That's what it's about. So this basically is the midpoint climax, I guess you could call it. You're going from the turning point and the characters are going into their unfamiliar situation. They are learning about their new world. They are trying to find their place in it. And throughout this, you're having action for the plot and character development. And you're gonna come to a midpoint climax, which generally speaking will mirror this climax of Act 3. So whatever stage they're at here, like if they're feeling pretty good right about here, they're being successful in their new world, and then some plot developments happen, it's going to flip the tables a little bit. And we're going to create more rising action from there on, basically forcing the characters into Act 3. And we're gonna head up into the actual real climax of the story. And this one is usually a lower point, even though it's high up on the scale. It's a lower point usually in terms of the character's arc. Because somewhere in here, usually the beat sheets say like you have your darkest moment, your blackest moment, whatever it is. It's the point where your characters think everything's gone wrong. There's no possible way they could complete their goal, manage to succeed, whatever it is. Somewhere in here, leading up in this rising action is like a fall. And they go to their darkest moment before shooting back up into the real climax of the story. And then Act 3 is pretty much all resolution. That's how I think of it. Yes, that's story structure, okay? You could separate this into as many acts as you want, but you're still probably going to be following this basic structure of a setup and a turning point and a rising action, another turning point, and then more rising action until you reach the climax, and then you get to resolve all of the open plot points and the character arcs, and hopefully your character has gotten to the point where they need to be, or at least partly there. If you're writing a series, you know, you won't have them be completely where they're at, but they will have started their journey at least. The way I think about series is that if I'm planning this 4-act structure for a character arc in the first book of a series, is I think about this in terms of the series. Each book has a story arc like this, but within a series, each series has a story arc like this as well. So because I generally write series, I do have to take that into consideration. Like, I don't want the characters to be like have nowhere to go in their development by the end of the first book if I know they still have journeys to go through, okay? I am going to draw the story circle really quick because I like it. I do pretty much use this plot embryo story circle structure because, again, it mirrors just about every beat sheet. Something finally clicked for me about why even this plot embryo story circle doesn't quite work for me. Why, like, I have to do things my own way because my stories, the way I envision them, don't necessarily mesh. So let me just draw the circle real quick in case you guys are unfamiliar with it. Okay, circle, sure. Just gonna pretend that I know how to draw whatsoever, okay? Okay, please don't judge me. Okay, so I'm just going to say so we have 1, the zone of comfort. Now, that's pretty much the setup, right? That is where we are at in Act 1. That is the character's stasis. And that can change from character to character. Sometimes they are a normal person, so we get a snapshot of their normal life. Sometimes they are already involved in a fantasy world, but they have a specific life before the plot happens. 2. But they need something. The character, whatever their zone of comfort is, they are not exactly where they want to be in life. They have something they need, something that they feel like would fulfill them. But sometimes they don't exactly know what that is, or they think they know what it is, right? 3 is go. They enter an unfamiliar situation. So that is basically the turning point. Now, the way a lot of stories happen is that this is like the inciting incident or just the plot point 1, but a lot of times your inciting incident that really introduces the plot is going to happen somewhere in here, and you're going to have some development before the characters are actually pushed into the world. At least that's how I write. That's why to say like, oh, this is where they enter an unfamiliar situation, okay, sure, maybe, but sometimes it happens earlier and you've got some plot that's happening to your character before they are actually finally pushed into a new world. Basically what I'm going with this is that, you know, use these as you will. So step 4 is they search. So they are adapting to their unfamiliar situation. And that's what a lot of Act 2, the beginning of Act 2 is. So they're in this new world. They're meeting new people, they are developing, they are heading towards a goal, something that they usually think that they need. Now, 5 is find. They find what they wanted. That's going to push them into the second half of Act 2, because whatever they think they need, this goal that they've reached, that's kind of around the midpoint climax, or something happens to impede their goal. Whatever it is, they think they find what they wanted, but then they have to pay its price. So that's usually heading into the second half of Act 2, or my Act 3, is that things start to get a little bit darker because they've paid a price for what they thought they wanted, but they are still like hurtling into the climax, right? They pay its price. And 7 is return. They go back to where they started. It's a return point, and that would usually be as they hit the climax. They are returning to where they were. And 8 is change, having changed. Sorry for my horrible handwriting. But this having changed is usually reflected in the resolution. The characters kind of get to reflect on their journey and who they were at the beginning and who they are now, and to see what exactly happened. Now, I realized why these things don't always fit for my stories, at least so far. I've planned quite a few and they don't quite follow this. And I guess the way I end up thinking about it is, let's see, I'm just gonna put down these numbers down here in red, and I'm gonna say that Act 1 has the zone of comfort and the need, but they need something. And then right around the turning point is 3, where they enter an unfamiliar situation. Act 2, the beginning of Act 2, my Act 2, is all about 4, adapting to it, searching for their goal, adapting to the new world. And then right about the midpoint climax is 5 and 6, where it's like they get what they wanted, but they pay a price for it, or they almost get what they wanted and something gets in their way and completely obstructs their journey to reach their goal. They have 5 and 6, and then that's kind of where I get lost, because that's how I end up thinking about it. But really, 5 and 6 to be kind of the climax. And when I think about it, I'm down here with the midpoint. I know that 7 and 8, they are returning, they're going back to where they started, not necessarily literally, but they do reflect change compared to Act 1. If we're supposed to think about it as 3, 4, maybe 5 and 6, right? Instead of like this, okay, that's fine. It still doesn't quite work for me. So because of the way I was describing it, here's what I end up writing, is their zone of comfort you write some kind of need for them, whatever it is, they feel incomplete, and they're gonna enter an unfamiliar situation. So 3 is kind of still right here, even though I generally start the plot pretty early on in Act 1. It's kind of like having a mini one of these inside Act 1 for me. I will try to explain that better maybe in a future video, but it's like I have a mini story circle inside of Act 1 before getting to the next act. It's like I almost have a complete story arc just within this first act. That probably sounds really weird, but it's how my brain works, I think, is because I start the plot, a bunch of stuff happens in here, and then we get to a point where there is a turning point, but then the tension kind of releases and we go into the 4 for adapting to the new world. And I spend a lot of time in here, usually because I'm writing fantasy, contemporary fantasy. So I spend a lot of time in this beginning of Act 2 where the characters are adapting to the new situation. They have some kind of goal in mind because of all the plot that happened here. They're heading towards a goal for this midpoint, and that's why I end up putting 5 here. And right about the midpoint climax, they find what they want and they pay the price for it. Now, generally how I end up writing it is that this goal that they reach is not their ultimate goal. Now, a lot of times we say this is the ultimate goal. They think they're gonna reach it here, but something happens. The rug is pulled out from underneath them, right? So for me, I guess it's like I gave all of my characters 2 goals. What they think is actually happening for the story and what is actually happening for the story. They have this goal, they reach this goal, and they pay a price for it. And usually in here, they realize that not everything is what they thought it was. There's something strange about the world. What their original goal was isn't going to help them. It isn't going to fix anything. It brought more trouble to them. It made things harder for them. So basically, I end up repeating these these like a few numbers, and I end up going, okay, so let's say 4, 2. Because now they've reached a goal and paid a price, and they're having to basically start over from this new point though. The characters here have already changed and they've kind of gone, oh shit, this isn't going to help us. This isn't what we thought it was. This is not this point. They're like, we got to start over. We have to figure out what it is that we really need to fix our problem, to get where we need to be. So they end up adapting and searching again, and then let's put a 5, 2. They end up again finding what they need, and 6, 2, paying the price for it. Because even at this climax, for me, I'm not gonna let my characters get away unscathed, okay? Because yes, that kind of happened here. They're still going to be at their like lowest, darkest points here, because this is a low arc for my characters. Is this here? They're high here where they're having fun. They think they're reaching it. They get something, but then they drop down and they're going, no, oh God, now what do we do? So they're having to repeat the process and go, what can we do now? What can we possibly do now? If this wasn't our goal, what is our goal? We're trying to figure it out. But they're going to hit the same roadblock in that they're going to pay a heavier price for this bigger climax. Pay a small price here, pay a big price here. And then 7 and 8, you get to resolve it. So I'm not sure that this makes a lot of sense to anybody else, but I repeat these parts of the circle. It's like I need another quarter to my story circle in order for the way I plan things. And following like the story circle, which basically mirrors like the 8 beats that you would have in a beat sheet in the hero's journey, it all mirrors the same story structure. Now, I end up kind of going with this when I'm following my characters and trying to figure out what the plot is. But generally speaking, for every story I've planned, this repeating of the middle fits my stories more. It's like it's too short of an arc for what I have planned for my characters, generally speaking. My characters go through hell. So I realized, I was like, oh man, I am a mean author. I put my characters through hell twice. I put them through a little mini hell where they don't even realize it's happening because they're all happy and learning new things, and they think they're reaching a good point, and then something dramatic happens, but it's a small hell. And then they're going through here and trying to get their act together because now they know something's going to be happening and they have to try to prepare for it, and they can't. That's usually how my stories go, is that they cannot possibly prepare for what this actual climax is because they've already been through this, but usually my characters have to realize that it's like they're on completely different levels. Yeah, that's where I am, is that I repeat 4, 5, and 6 of this adapting to the situation, finding what they want, paying the price for it. This way of thinking for me doesn't vary a lot from the actual structure of this. It's just a matter of the way I think about it. That I couldn't just say, oh, 4, 5, 6. I was like, no, something about this isn't working for me personally and the way I plan my stories. So I had to sit there and go, what is it about this that is not working for me? Because I don't want to say that I'm just like, oh, a pantser, because I do plan my stories to the best of my abilities. So really, I just wanted to show you guys how I plan a story in all of its messiness, because I learned early on that regular beat sheets, the traditional beat sheets, didn't work for me. I could never coordinate the scenes in my head to the plot points. And like I already said here, where I kind of write act 1 like it's a mini one of these. Yeah, I kind of do that here and here and here. Like each one of these acts for me kind of feels separate. So there's usually some sort of arc in here that gets a little bit resolved before leading into the next arc. So they're going to be in a zone of comfort for the new situation. Whatever the new situation is, it's not necessarily the zone of comfort though anymore. It's just they're in a stasis for their situation. If you really wanted to think about it, what I could say is that, let's see, I'll try to use another color, is that there's one story circle in here that goes like this, right? Here's another story circle. Yep, then here's another one. Woo! Can I draw? No. Is there a full story circle in here? Maybe not. But generally speaking, I kind of keep it in mind because of the way the resolution has to go, is that I have to kind of reflect on everything that's happened so far and see if there's anywhere else left for them to go. So that's, yeah, I don't know. My brain is a weird place, and you have to think that I'm usually planning long series and long intricate books with multiple point of view characters, and I have to do what works for me and what works for my characters and what works for their story and the story that needs to be told. I can go into this kind of stuff like the mini story circles in each act that are kind of inside my head if you guys want. I'm not sure that I even did any of this well enough for you to understand what's happening in my brain. The gist of it that I wanted you guys to understand is that I repeat the biggest portions of the story circle in my main thinking of my planning. Every story I've planned, this is kind of how it goes. So it helps me understand my own process better. Okay, so I cut myself off pretty fast there because I was getting really long-winded and I didn't want to do like a total rehash. I just wanted to give the general story structure as I think about it with my 4 acts and the character arcs that help me plot, basically. So this is it for this video. Next video with planning my project, I will give you guys actual examples from my current project as I do it. So I'll show you guys kind of how I start to brainstorm and start to fill out some of the details and like the first building blocks of like my character arcs. And I'll probably do a couple more videos like as I go, just to show you guys how my process actually works, because it's one thing to like explain it as well as I can and then to kind of show you guys what I mean by that. So that's pretty much it. If you guys do have any further questions about anything that I said, please feel free to ask me. I can try to expand on anything while I'm planning this, while I'm doing this series, so I can try to talk about anything more, especially my concept that I do complete arcs, complete story circles in each act. I don't feel like many people talk about that, but that's kind of how I plan. So, but that's kind of in like the 3rd or 4th stage of where I get when I'm planning. So if you guys do want more information about that, that will probably be coming, but just make sure to let me know let me know if you have any questions, okay? So hopefully this helped. Not to give anybody advice, but just to let you know, for those of you who wanted to know something about my personal process for writing, planning a story, where I kind of start from. This is just the basis of story structure for me. Yeah, like that's it. Give this video a like if you liked it, and let me know any questions, comments, whatever you guys have, and I will see you guys in my next video for more NaNoWriMo updates and more about my planning process. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. See you guys next time. Bye.